Hi, this is Kevin Deal from Upscale Audio, and today we're going to talk about the Focal Sopra 2. I was not even going to do a video today. I was going to blow it off because I don't look so good. I didn't have a chance to use my touch of gray. Yeah, I use touch of gray. I'll admit it, sometimes with good results, and then there's been a couple times like this where it wasn't so good. And then there was another time where it was like really bad. But today, I'm just going to go au naturel, so hang with me. I had to do it because it dawned on me that this is like one of the hottest speakers that we sell, period, and we had not done a video on it. So first, I want to talk a little bit about Focal and what makes them a different company. There is no other brand in the industry that is really like Focal. A company that makes things from front to back, a company that makes drivers, a company that has made money for other speaker manufacturers for decades. I mean, there are big speaker brands out there that would not exist today were it not for Focal, because they were an engineering and driver manufacturing firm for a long, long time. And then they said, well, wait, why are we making other people rich? Why don't we make our own speakers? And that's what they did. I went to the factory a couple years ago, and I am telling you, oh my God, it was an unbelievable experience. I have never seen engineering like that. Engineering where they're using lasers to see how surrounds react, and using lasers to see how cones react and how they break up, and then how they make the Beryllium dome tweeters and how they make the cabinets, and they have a paint shop in-house. This is not some melamine coated plywood. I mean, that's not what this is. These cabinets are done in a paint shop. It's automotive paint. Unbelievable. Let's talk a little bit, though, about the drivers. Focal is a company, you look at this 6.5-inch mid-range, and it might look like the 6.5-inch mid-range that's in the Sopra 1, or in the Sopra 3, or maybe in even other models of Focal speakers that are not even part of the Sopra line, but it is not true. They just look the same. Focal makes over 250 drivers. Now, what's important about that? I'm going to tell you. I managed to steal some shit while I was at the factory. All of these cones look the same. They're not the same, not at all. They're able to manipulate the thickness of the cone, the shape of the cone ever so slightly. They're able to manipulate the number of voice coil windings, how the magnets is charged, the voice coil gap. What they want to do is this. They want to make the driver behave the way they want it to behave, even before it sees a crossover, even before it sees a cabinet. And then by doing so, they can make crossovers that are simpler, that are less obtrusive to your amplifier, fewer phase angles, things that amplifiers don't like to see. They want the drivers to behave the way they want it to behave naturally first. And you can see that. You can see that in the sensitivity of their speakers and how easy they are to drive. I mean, a lot of people use Focal speakers with solid state amps. But I'll tell you what, the real darlings, I mean, all these guys that have tube amps, they love Focal because the speakers are so easy to drive. You can see it in their sensitivity, usually 2 or 3 dB more efficient than other brands. So, the Sopra 2, what we're going to do is we're going to break this down starting from the top. This is a Beryllium dome headphone driver, and I wanted to bring this and show it to you. This is from a Utopia headphone, but I wanted to demonstrate something. There's a lot of companies that say that they use Beryllium today, and maybe they do, maybe they don't. Actually using Beryllium in reality is a very, very difficult thing to do. When I was at the factory, the guy that was making the Beryllium domes was working in a big clean room, and he was, get out of here. Anyway, he was working in a clean room and wearing really what would be equivalent to a spacesuit. I really felt like I was walking into NASA when I was witnessing this. Beryllium is not an easy material to work with, but Beryllium is magical for high-frequency drivers. This is a Beryllium dome. And you can see how little mass it has. That's what I'm talking about. So what's important about that? I was so curious about the reaction of beryllium and why it's such a magical material that we went out and we got some tuning forks made of magnesium and aluminum and titanium. And what we did is we wrapped these tuning forks and we recorded their response using a microphone and Pro Tools. And I'm going to show you a graph right now, and what you're going to see is the start time and stop time of a beryllium tuning fork versus other materials. And you're going to see that it stops ringing very quickly. And that is super, super important because ringing tweeter domes is what causes listening fatigue. So you want to use a tweeter that has plenty of extension, but you don't want it to be fatiguing like so many other speaker brands are. Beryllium is the perfect material for that. But it's not just that they use beryllium, it's what they do with it. This is the headphone driver, and you're going to notice that it has what's called a pour-on suspension. Pour-on allows the driver to actually have a little bit of excursion. And so it is with the beryllium tweeter in Focal loudspeakers. They also use a pour-on suspension. Why do they do that? Because it actually has excursion. Unlike other manufacturers, look, the most difficult thing for a loudspeaker to get right is the mid-range and the upper mid-range where it misses the tweeter. Anywhere from 1,000 hertz on up, that's no man's land. That's where everybody chokes it. And I'm going to tell you something. Focal has managed to master this like nobody else. The tweeter is crossed over at a lower frequency than most manufacturers would. And by doing so, it blends more seamlessly with the mid-range driver. The whole idea here is when you're in your listening seat, you don't want to sound like you're hearing a tweeter and a mid-range. That's the reason for it. It's also the reason for the shape of the cabinet. You're trying to create a speaker that is more phase coherent. So it sounds like it's playing back from a single point source. So that's what beryllium is about. It's a magical material, and the fact that they use pour-on makes it completely unique. That's the reason for this vent in the back. Because there is excursion from the tweeter, you want to make sure that there's no air mass, that there's nothing that impede what the tweeter can do. And it's called infinite acoustic loading, and you're only going to find it on Focal loudspeakers. Now, let's get to the mid-range driver. First off, I want to say something. I love Focal because they have a history. If you look at all of their speakers, their mid-range drivers are a little bit larger in diameter. And I dig that because I like vocals a lot. I love Neil Young, especially his acoustic stuff. I like the Johnny Cash, later the American recordings. Love that. Love Jim Morrison. I love Lyle Lovett. Hell yeah. I love good vocals. And I want to be able to get the chestiness of a singer. I want to get the body. And sometimes, with some speakers that use a little bit smaller mid-range driver, you can get just a little bit of this effect where they don't sound like this. They sound a little more like this. All you got to do is cup your hands around your mouth and you'll see what I'm talking about. So these larger mid-range drivers, 6.5-inch drivers that Focal is known for using, I think is super, super helpful. But they've gone beyond that. It's not just about reaching down, it's about reaching up. And they've addressed that with this suspension. And they've addressed that by bringing the speaker up where it can operate up to 5,000 hertz to meet the tweeter. And they looked at how to reduce mid-range distortion. And the biggest part of that is the suspension. This is called TMD, tuned mass damping. And what they did is they looked by using lasers and measuring very, very carefully what the response is of the mid-range driver with different types of surround. You want to, the suspension has to act as a damper, but it's not just the damper coming in, it's also the damper going out. And what they did is they put very specific ridges, and this was done with a lot of research over a long period of time. They form ridges into the surround, and it helps to reduce distortion, and it reduces the mid-range driver from overreaching where it's not supposed to go. And it creates a mid-range that's really, really, really super clean. And then the W-cone driver, I mean, it sounds amazing. It's stiff, so it's really, really super clean. It doesn't break up, and it sounds super, super natural. Now let's talk about the bottom end. And this is what I love about this speaker. It has real bass response. These two 7-inch drivers move as much air as a much larger driver, but this is what they did. A lot of engineering into this cabinet. They wanted to create a speaker that your wife is not going to throttle you over because it's a big-ass ugly box. They wanted something that would look graceful, but actually have good bottom end out of a cabinet volume of this size. And they really achieved that. So unlike some speakers, the bottom end on this, I'm going to say one more thing to you. If you buy a pair of Sopras from me or anywhere else, make sure that you run them in. We've got a break-in disc that we can supply you with, because you have to break in the suspension of the bass drivers and the suspension of the tweeter. So just like any good loudspeaker, you got to put time on it. This speaker is going to sound better in 5 years than it is when it's coming out of the box. We also have a tool that we give to our customers when they buy speakers from us, especially if you have a solid state amplifier called the AHA LS Noise Killer. It's a very, very cool box that's made in the Netherlands. They don't make them anymore, so I can't sell them to the public. But if you ever buy a pair of Sopras from us or a number of other speakers, this little box is very, very cool for helping get you over the break-in process. And on top of that, some people like to just leave them on. It's not something that changes the sound of the speaker per se. It's something that changes your perception of the speaker. And it can help just relax things a little bit. It's a very small effect, but it's very, very helpful when you're going through the break-in process. So they come in a number of different colors, and I'm happy to play them for you. Listen, there's no such thing as the best loudspeaker. I hate it when people call and they go, oh, I called this place and they said that brand ABC is the best. I go, it is? Yeah, they said it's the best. I mean, and that is absolute bullshit. You got to find out what it is that trips your trigger and what's important to you. What are the acoustics of the room? Do you have a lot of carpet? Do you have a hardwood floor? Do you have tile? All of those things come into play. What kind of an amp are you going to play it with? The people that work here are experts, and none of them are on commission, because I hate that stuff. I mean, I can just smell it coming. So when you come to our store, or when you call my wonderful salespeople here, they're not on commission, and they're not going to try to sell you a frickin' thing. On top of that, we guarantee the best price, always. We get special buys from a lot of manufacturers. And we take trade-ins. Get rid of that old tchotchke you have and get something cool. Plus, we have no interest financing options. Many times we got like up to 12 months no interest. So if you want to sell your other stuff, you got a year to do it. So look, come into our store, go to our website, call my great salespeople. I promise you, we will treat your system like it's ours. Thanks.